What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Grid Encore. I'm Ben Schneider, joined as always by Brandon Crossland, and look who else decided to join us tonight. Jackson Lambros is here. INDY NXT Iowa, just too much to talk about for him to stay away. Jackson, how's it going? I understand you got off work early specifically, so you could come here on this show. Is that correct?
Can't say that's the direct reason, but certainly a motivation. What's going on, guys? Really happy to be here.
Yeah.
I'm doing great. Brandon, how are you?
Doing well, and it is indeed a Motor Monday. Jackson, we've got this going now.
Beautiful.
Yeah, Motor Mondays, although there's nothing in it this time, so there's no smoke and mirrors there. But yeah, big weekend to talk about with Pocono and also Iowa for Indy Next.
Apologies for that, Brandon. I got the pop-up message when I logged on to StreamYard that they were having some issues with their background music and videos. Thankfully, I think the intro video played fine, but I turned off the intro loops, but it wouldn't do that, and yet it still somehow played the encore.
I bring the scuff in here with me. I apologize, gentlemen.
I just imagined that I was the only one that was hearing it, and that's what got me through that speech there. Also, the color coordination, Jackson, it was not on the memo. Sorry you didn't get that one.
Sorry.
That's all right.
It's a blue Monday.
My bad.
Sorry.
Well, that's still is that just the lighting, or is that a light shade of blue?
It's a lighter blue. It's kind of like in the sky blue kind of section. Yeah. Not quite there, but it's close enough, I think.
We'll give you a pass. It's close enough.
Appreciate it.
All right. We're going to jump into it here in just a moment. But first, as always, I want to give a shout out to our Patreon investors, Colin Deschelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew. Your support means the world to us. And if you are watching, you like what you see tonight, you can consider joining them to help us get to the track on a more regular basis and help continue to expand our coverage for you, the viewers. Or if you'd rather make a one-time donation instead, you can visit the Buy Me a Coffee links in the description box below. Or if you're watching us live here on YouTube, we have Super Chats enabled as well. And as always, you can follow us on all our social media platforms and visit gridnetworktv.com, where Jackson is covering the IndyCar Series this year for us with his weekly articles after every race. So make sure you go check those out as well. Now, Jackson, I want to start with you. Let's talk about Iowa a little bit. And this is something that doesn't just affect the Indy NXT Series or the IndyCar Series. It affected NASCAR in their recent visit there as well. We had this strange partial repave, really only the single groove on the lower part of it turns here. Iowa reportedly didn't have enough time to repave the entire track before the start of this season, so they did a partial repave. They're still deciding what they're going to do in the future here. But Jackson, we've seen the NASCAR racing with this new partial repave. We've seen an IndyCar race weekend now with both the main series and Indy Next. What do you think they should do heading into 2025? Should they go ahead and repave the entire track? Should they let this part age for a few years and then repave the upper grooves? Should they just repave what they just repaved and do a full repave this time? What do you think?
I mean, it feels like for everybody, whether it's the Indy guys or the Cup guys or just anyone, it feels like the conversation has been all or nothing. And I think maybe the big exception this weekend was Indy Next, because it felt like they were getting comfortable running side by side, right? So there was a little bit of hope, but obviously we just did not see that at all for the big cars this weekend, both Saturday night and Sunday, which again is proving that track temp is not going to be a factor that's going to make that racing better at all. So unless we repave everything, I think it's going to be the exact same kind of, 250 lap conga line that we got last year. And really quickly, I want to mention the main issue of this, because it's not just the fact that you take grip out of the outside line or essentially make the inside lines that much superior. It's just, and I believe it was you, Ben, that mentioned this during testing before we actually went here, just how much that throws tire degradation out the window as a factor of the race. This new surface, so much easier on the tires, in what Kyle Kirkwood was mentioning, being one of the lone races where fuel is almost always going to go out before tires, and it's just focusing on babying the tires as much as possible.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Brandon, do you have any thoughts on the whole situation?
Yeah, I just think it is long overdue for Iowa to get a repave. It's up there where the season's affected so much. Like you look at Michigan and other places like that, they are not immune to the elements, and the grooves get really messed up there. And also, it was Rusty Wallace's baby back in 2006. This place has not been touched in a while, and so when the NASCAR Cup Series came to town, it was not a repave, it was kind of a manicure. They're kind of just setting the corners up in such a way that they get rid of the major bumps, which if you've ever played around on the iRacing scan of Iowa, you get those bumps into turn one. They can throw your car off, and it's much worse than an open wheel, I imagine. So, yeah, it's interesting that the relationship where these tracks are a part of the NASCAR circuit, and also with IndyCar. You look back at Las Vegas and how it was much flatter with IndyCar. And then all of a sudden NASCAR comes into play, and we want to up the banking and make it a little more Atlanta-like, so we can both coexist. And that eventually, unfortunately, led to some disastrous results in 2011 and pushed IndyCar out of the picture. So this is kind of that's a tangent, but in an inverse kind of way, this is Iowa, where IndyCar has been the main dog, and now here comes NASCAR settling in. I think it deserves a repave, and maybe for the safety of open wheel as well. It might improve the racing for NASCAR too.
No, 100%. I think independent of the Cup Series coming, or just NASCAR as a whole coming into the picture, I think a repave was on the agenda for this track in the next 2-3 years. I think what this did was expedite that process and kind of put Iowa in a position where they needed to obviously patch up some holes, but didn't maybe have the time or capital to do a complete repave. So I think it's the best thing for what you could do at the time, but this needs to be a step towards a full repave.
For sure.
Yeah, totally agree with both of you. And I think that, I remember I was at the tweet up in Sonoma right before the Cup race, and everybody was talking about Iowa coming up. And Jeff Gluck mentioned, that he was very concerned about what the racing was going to look like. And then I dug up one of the tweets that had gotten one of the pictures, and we were talking amongst a few fans, just, expressing our concerns and wondering how this was going to work out. And I have to say, from a NASCAR standpoint, a little bit better than I expected. I think there was still room for side-by-side racing because, of course, fresh asphalt versus, what did you say, Brandon, 06, 07? I mean, how long had it been?
2006.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about asphalt that's, almost 2 decades old now at this point. I mean, of course, everybody needs to be, you're not going to make any time up if you're trying the high lane that they haven't repaved. So it really puts the drivers in a box from that standpoint. But it was wider than I was picturing in my mind when we saw the NASCAR cars up there. But I think for IndyCar, especially INDY NXT, I think still got some solid racing in there. Just catching up on the highlights before we came on the show here, and thinking back to what the commentators were saying, that who said this was going to be a one groove racetrack. We're actually getting some solid action here. But I think for the main series, left a lot to be desired. I think the on track passes were way down from last year and years previous, so that was frustrating. So I think that there was this sort of idea that maybe we just live with it for a few years, let it age, and then, we have fresh pavement on the high side in 2028 or whatever, and an aging pavement down low. And then maybe that gives us something we've never seen before and could really create some exciting racing. But I'm of the mindset that I think it's probably not worth waiting this out. If Iowa can go ahead and at least repave what they haven't repaved yet, and, maybe in doing that, you might just, consider a full repave. At that point, I think that's probably what's best for the Speedway long term.
100%. And before we kind of move on, because yes, I know we're going to talk more about Firestone's choice here for the next race. I do want to mention what Ed Carpenter was talking about regarding how much hybrids are a factor here.
Sure.
And obviously he runs a damn team. He's going to know a lot more than me, right? But from the perspective of a fan, and as someone who's kind of covering this for a living, I don't think we've been given a track that has been able to properly showcase this. I think Iowa, in the state it is, regardless of the hybrids in these cars or not, racing was going to be difficult. You could argue the same thing with Mid-Ohio. The gap from first to second for the past couple of years have been well under a second, and while you argue that means close finishing, it's actually the contrary, because it's so difficult to overtake at Mid-Ohio. Both of these are very momentum-focused tracks, not like a Long Beach or even a Barber where you have a lot of stop-go, a lot of really slow speed corners, and where you go from 50 to 150. So I think from a handling perspective, for sure things are going to have to be cleaned up. and teams are going to go and fix that and kind of address those issues as things go on. But when we get to Toronto, a street circuit, and when we get to especially Gateway in Milwaukee, where you actually, lifting off and potentially braking, and you're not like, was saying, it's like an iRacing IndyCar, like flat out track where you're just mashing the throttle pretty much the whole. I mean, there is some lifting, but not to the extent of these other short ovals, right? So I think once we get to the last of these two road courses and the short ovals where you really do have to lift off a lot more, I think we're going to see some really, really good hybrid racing. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I certainly think two race weekends at least. I know we had a doubleheader this weekend, but probably not a big enough sample size to make a full judgment call just yet here, though. Ed Carpenter's comments perhaps a little bit concerning. We have seen some issues creep up, within some of the teams here. So again, despite the fact that they've been working on this for years, we're supposed to introduce it at the start of this year, still pushed it back, and we still have these comments. Probably not great for the series, but at the same time, I don't know. It's at a point where we need to throw them a towel and just revert back for the rest of the season either. So we'll keep our eye on that. Speaking of getting data, we've been screaming about this for years. IndyCar Series, Indy NXT especially, save the Freedom 100. They need more ovals for these young drivers to be able to prepare themselves for the greatest spectacle in racing, the Indianapolis 500. And Firestone had to make some adjustments this weekend. We saw a press release early Saturday morning saying that the race distance had been adjusted to 55 laps. They were going to throw a competition caution, and then that caution was going to last approximately 10 laps and a single file restart to begin the remaining race distance there. So, Jackson, I know you have some strong thoughts on the race weekend. Do you think that Firestone got this call right, and was it better to discover the need for this before the race started than have to make adjustments on the fly during the race, which we've seen Firestone have to do at places like Texas before?
Welcome to stage racing, Indy NXT. Let's go. No, I'm kidding. I don't know. This is a tough one because it's a tough call because obviously you want to see all the laps ran green, and I think it's making the most of a kind of last minute correction that you obviously have to make. I think the solution was either, have a competition caution like this or just cut 10 laps off of the race. And I think this was genuinely the better answer of the two, especially when you look at the battles we were having really, really late into the race. So I think 100% we do need more oval data, but I think the fantastic news with this, Ben, is we're going to get so much more oval data later on in this year as we see this incredibly oval heavy end of this season, not just for IndyCar, but for the next guys. And I genuinely don't know how much something like the Freedom 100 would fix a scenario like this, just because, again, with the different racing surfaces and this, what's supposed to be the short-term repave, this feels like such a special scenario that I kind of get why Indy decided to kind of pull out the stops and do something special like this.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jackson. There's a lot ahead on the calendar that you're going to get this data that we've been seeking. It is unfortunate the case with the ovals and the lack thereof that we've had in all the road to Indy, and certainly in the IndyCar series over the past few years. And thankfully, it just the last one of the season has come by accident. I have to talk about it because it's down the road in Lebanon. The Music City Grand Prix was supposed to be on the streets of Nashville if it weren't for the Tennessee Titans wanting to go ahead and get their new Nissan Stadium built, which takes away part of just a part of the track just to get them over the Korean Veterans Memorial Bridge. But we're going to have Nashville Super Speedway, Milwaukee, and then also Gateway coming up on August 17th. So a lot to look forward to for Firestone to get this dialed in, get more data under the belt, and I would like to see more on the schedule, please.
Yes.
And yes, Freedom 100 hasn't been around since 2019, and the fact that I was at the last one upsets me, and also makes me feel good at the same time.
I'm going to say this really quickly before I throw it to Ben, but I think talking to a lot of guys within the paddock, I think it is a factor of safety why we haven't seen cars go back to the super speedway. Mainly because I don't think we obviously do have the halos now in these cars, but it's not to Indy cars safety standards when it comes to super speedways, right? So I think we're going to need an aero screen. I think we're going to need a new generation of next cars, which should hopefully come when these new Indy cars come in to hopefully replace the DW12 in the next couple of years. And I think that will hopefully open the door to not just Indy, but maybe whatever new super speedways, which don't want to go down this bird walk, but hopefully will find their way back onto this calendar.
So you're saying you think Indy NXT puts an aero screen on their cars to replace the Halo? You think that's our ticket to get in the Freedom 100 back?
I think it would be one of the biggest steps, 100%. It's not oval running itself that's the issue. We see how oval heavy this schedule has become now just in the past couple of years. I also think it is a little bit of obviously the financial side of COVID and that kind of taking the wind out of the sails for that. But I think ultimately it's a combination of safety and teams not wanting the risk of both hurting their drivers and, wrecking a ton of race cars in the progress of trying to do something like this. So I think also when you consider the new data that's going to come from these ovals, putting 2 and 2 together here, that genuinely is something that could go a really long way, especially at places like Nashville, where you might get kind of close to the speed we could be seeing at Indy for the Freedom 100.
All right, we'll leave it there. Real quick one more comment on this, and then we'll move on here. Just taking a look at the schedule, actually. If you put Portland in the springtime, you would have a schedule where we have 10 straight road courses and 4 straight ovals to finish out the year. So it would literally be divided, not evenly, but you would have your first portion all road and street and your second portion all oval. So I like that we've got 4 ovals. I just perhaps wish they were staggered a little bit better so that it's not like race 10, we introduce our first oval and then, it's almost all ovals all the way to the end of the year, because I feel like that kind of throws a wrench in the championship fight. And again, I know this isn't on the rundown, but just have to ask you guys, I don't know if you've taken a look at the standings here. Big weekend for Louis Foster, ended up winning the race. Jacob Abel had an issue at the end, finished all the way down in 15th. Kyle Collette crashed with Miles Rowe. That leaves him 17th. So he really opened up his points gap over his 2 championship rivals. Jackson, do you think that it's Foster's championship to lose at this point? We got 4 races left, and he's got, just trying to do math quickly in my head here, 77-point gap on second place now. Is that insurmountable?
I mean, when you compare it to the gap in the IndyCar Championship where it's about 50 and change, I mean, you're still within striking distance, but you're going to need consistent chaos going for Louis Foster to really tighten up that championship. And obviously what happened to Jacob Abel this weekend does not help at all. But I think it's for sure Louis to lose, right? But it's going to need consistent podiums, consistent top 5s to really, if not, get this over with before Nashville, to just make that a sizable lead to keep the percentage of possibilities, in his favor. But it's definitely looking like shades of Palou last year with a really, really strong running at this point in the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm still impressed by Jamie Chadwick there from Road America. Started on the pole and got her win there, 5th in the points. But yeah, Louis Foster, it kind of looks like how we see for Corey Heim in the Truck Series. It's just very tall order there to get past that with a little left in the season.
Now, Foster hasn't finished worse than second since the first IMS road course race of that doubleheader where he was 7th. And that's his only non-top 5 of the year as well. So he certainly has put together some fantastic results, and I think absolutely his championship to lose. But again, Kyle Collette, somebody who I think is, like Jamie Chadwick was last year and still is this year, trying to learn these ovals. You have him right in this championship hunt, 3 top 2 finishes in a row here, and then you give him a massive challenge like this, trying to learn the style of racing with 4 out of 5 races to end the year. I just wish it was staggered a little bit more evenly so that we didn't have that, because that almost takes him out of a championship through no fault of his own. It's a real disadvantage for him trying to learn this kind of racing on the fly like this, and makes it even more difficult for him to mount that championship charge. So we'll keep our eye on that. Before we move on to Xfinity, however, we can't stop talking about Hailie Deegan on this show, I guess, despite the fact that she's no longer with AM Racing. It's been a major talking point, obviously, the last couple of weeks. Now there's a new wrinkle in the Hailie Deegan saga. Is Indy NXT in her future? She was at Iowa this weekend. Some eagle-eyed sleuths on Instagram noticed that she followed the series and followed Andretti. So now people are starting to connect the dots and wonder, is a move to open wheel racing something that she would be considering, and leaving the NASCAR row that she's been a part of for the last 6 or 7 years now entirely? Jackson, what would be your thoughts on Hailie Deegan making a career change at this point to go to Indy NXT?
Oval expertise definitely helps, especially if the conversations would be entering at this point in the season. But my knowledge on Deegan is very, very low, especially when it comes to her history. I do know majority stock car stuff. For Andretti and them to be mutual on Instagram, I think that's less of something that's locked in, but I think there's definitely a possibility that talks are happening between those two. Yeah, it's really hard to say. I think she would be really strong on the ovals, but it is really hard to make that adjustment mentally from stock cars to open wheels, especially when you've driven stock cars a vast majority of your career. We were talking a little bit about this before the show, right when this came off, but I think the best bet, if it was anywhere that wasn't the Cup Series, great relationship with Ford. We've seen her run in the Mustang GT4 a couple times in the Michelin Pilot Challenge. If not Indy NXT, and maybe it's a part-time season next year, maybe it's ovals only, and we'll see. But I would not be surprised to see her also dipping her toe again in some sports car racing if she's not back in an Xfinity car or Truck Series car or any kind of stock car.
I think you were in our chat last week making that very argument there, so that could be a path for her as well. Brandon, what would be your thoughts on trying to make the switch over to open wheel?
As much as I think that's a viable option for her, and if Andretti Global is indeed with talks with her, that wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. I do think, sports cars would be a much closer fit, I guess, for where she's coming from. Of course, I haven't been in it, but from going from a full-bodied stock car to a single-seater open wheel machine, I feel like it's a lot more athleticism that takes place, a lot more G's going on, and just see the pants endurance and just crazy stuff going on when you're driving an open wheel car, no matter what level it is. So no question, it's absolutely different from the world of NASCAR. So we'll definitely have a learning curve. But yeah, I agree. When she comes to the ovals, though, it should be not as bad, but still not without its learning curves for sure.
Well, I want to say hi to Corrito here in the chat real quick, and it looks like a comment just coming in from Alex Fleener as well. Do you think the lack of open Ford seats are holding her back from getting another ride in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, or is it just no openings right now? I think it might be that to an extent, but again, we can sugarcoat it all we want. The results just weren't there with AM Racing, and if we're being honest, they really weren't there for 3 years when she was driving for David Gilliland Racing and ThorSport Racing in the Truck Series. And again, I have to bring up, there's certainly, people said DGR was a B team. I don't know how you can call ThorSport anything but an A team when the rest of her teammates were in the playoffs and Ben Rhodes actually won the championship. So, again, it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. And I think, the results simply didn't showcase her talent in the NASCAR side of things. And I think, it's not to say she could never make it in stock car racing. But again, I think if she were to stay in that part of the motorsports world, I think the best option for her would be to go back to the ARCA platform and try to reinvent herself down there. Or maybe there's a truck team out there that would be willing to offer her something, who knows. But this is an interesting development here because, again, say what you will about the results. She has the stock car experience, and 18, 19, 20, 20, 21, 22, 23. That's 6 years full time between what was NK and N West, ARCA, in trucks before she even got to Xfinity this year. Now you throw a half season in there of that. I know the results haven't been great, but she has the miles underneath her in terms of, driving a stock car and all the learning that she did from that experience. And Jimmy Johnson, who's a 7-time Cup champion, said it when he was trying to make this switch just a few years ago. He had to unlearn so much to be able to pick up what he was trying to figure out in an Indy car. So it is a very difficult career change to make. And that's a 7-time champion saying that. I know Jimmy probably wasn't in his prime in his early to mid 40s, but if he was struggling that much with it, I imagine it's not going to be an easy task for Deegan. That's not saying that I put it past her or anything. But I think that, for her at this point in her career, and she is still very young. I think she turns 23 later this week, actually. So, plenty of time for her to figure out what she wants to do with the rest of her career. But I think that, where she is in stock car racing right now was going to be a challenge to figure out what would be that next step for her in a world that she's become very familiar with. To go over to Indy NXT, I mean, if she wants to take that challenge on, God bless her. I wish her nothing but the best. But I imagine, we saw, how much Jamie Chadwick struggled coming into Indy NXT last year. And, again, not to say that W Series cars or, Formula 4 cars are identical to Indy NXT. Obviously, they're not. But you would think there'd be a lot more overlap from going from a European open wheel single seater series over to Indy NXT than there is coming from stock car racing over to Indy NXT with minimal, if any, open wheel experience. I don't know. I mean, I know Deegan rode him at 2-seater all those years ago. People were digging up that tweet from 2019, which is kind of ironic to think about now. But it's going to be very interesting. So we'll see if she takes this challenge on. I'll be very curious to see how she could do. But again, I think as for her right now, Carrito says the same thing here in the chat. I think IMSA probably makes, Michelin Pilot Challenge, you look at the results that she had there, probably makes most sense for her at this point in her career.
Yeah, and Jackson, like we've been talking about Hailie Deegan the last 2 or 3 weeks since she's been in the news. I've been keeping track of where AM Racing is finishing with their other drivers. Joey Logano finished 8th with that 15 car, and we talked about it. We don't think Hailie Deegan would be up in P8 at a place like the Loop 110 in Chicago. But then, I mean, on that same token, you go to the Pocono weekend here for the Xfinity Series. Josh Berry finishes in that same car, 27th. And that sounds a little more like where we might think Hailie Deegan would finish up at a place like Pocono. I mean, anyone in the AM Racing car. But that is the Xfinity Series. We'll get to there when we get to there. But just while you're here, Jackson, that's kind of where I've been tracking it.
I will point out, to be completely fair, Barry had a couple of flat tires. I don't know if you can pin that on the team necessarily, but it certainly did not help his cause. Jackson, do you have any?
I don't remember, but I'll throw this back to you because, again, we were chatting during the Loop 110. You were saying that Logano was chatting with some of the crew members, I think, in and out of the car, and it seemed like there might have been some factors that were just not generally driver friendly with that outfit. And you can correct me on that, but it seemed like Logano was also kind of making some corrections, and it seemed like maybe there was some reason why it was hard for her to feel at home there.
I don't know. Oh, yeah, I mean, of course, they replaced the crew chief before they replaced the driver.
Yep.
So I mean, I don't think, I'm not trying to excuse Deegan's bad results and say none of it's on her at all, because you have Truck Series results to reference as well. But we know that they've got the technical alliance with SHR. You would think on paper that would make them a pretty prepared team. It did sound like, I don't remember off the top of my head what the exact quote was, but it sounded like there were people saying, Joey Logano must just be going crazy in the car because it sounds like this team's very underprepared. And then you have what happened to Josh Berry this weekend. So perhaps not entirely. I'm not even going to say perhaps. Definitely not entirely on Hailie Deegan. The fact that the AM Racing team was struggling so much to get top 20 finishes, but at the same time, the Xfinity Series is very competitive, and we know AM Racing had some solid results for Brett Moffitt the previous year. So again, I think it probably made sense for both sides to go their separate ways at this point, just for whatever reason it wasn't working out. But again, I'll just say Indy NXT, not where I expected Deegan to potentially land here. And again, I feel silly even broaching the whole social media thing because, I think people get so freaked out. Like, I think LeBron James unfollowed the Cleveland Cavaliers one time on Twitter, and everybody was like, oh, what does this mean? He's going to leave in free agency. And I think, just to base an entire prediction off of that, I think is, a massive stretch. Anytime we bring up who's following who or who's unfollowing who on social media, I don't think you can put too much stock in that. But it is interesting to look at that and connect the dots and think, is there some sort of business connection there that could lead to some conversations, which potentially lead to, an opportunity opening up. So it's something I guess you could keep your eyes on here, but don't want to put too much stock into that either. Deegan said in her statement as soon as the news broke that she's actively searching for opportunities to continue her racing career and finish out the year with somebody in some series. So we'll keep an eye on it. I'm sure it's not going to be the last time we're talking about her and her career this season, but again, would be a very interesting path for her to go down and interesting challenge for her to take up. We'll see. All right. A couple more comments to catch up on here from Carito asking, hey, Ben, what do you think should RCR do? Do you think RCR should let Austin Dillon be the owner now or sell RCR to somebody like Dale Jr.? That would be an interesting proposition. I think Jr. would probably be the most qualified buyer outside of a Childress or Dillon family. But I think people were saying that about Austin Dillon, as soon as Kyle Busch joined the team. Maybe whatever Dillon's pitch was to Kyle Busch certainly worked, getting him over to RCR. Maybe he would be better in a managerial type of role, although we say that now in 2024, Kyle Busch is running just as bad as Austin Dillon is out on the track. So who knows what's going to happen in the future with RCR, gentlemen. I don't know if you want to comment on that or if we can just move on.
I would. That's not all Kyle Busch's fault. I think we saw that just yesterday, but that's all I have to say about that.
I saw the incident. It's not all, it's not entirely KB's fault, but again, it's a lot of different dominoes kind of leading to falling at this point.
He's between a rock and a hard place for sure at RCR. It's like you can't catch a break this year.
Yeah, I think again, I'll save it for my knots in grid tonight, but Corey LaJoie better hope Rowdy Childress is an absolute magician. That's all I got to say when it comes to that number 7 team.
Yeah.
For Spire here. I hate to say this. I think it will have to take a girl with the last name Earnhardt for there to be a NASCAR superstar. Well, again, I know.
Come on, Amelia, let's go.
I was very, very young. I know that people are already imagining what a NASCAR career might look like for. I think that would be an enormous amount of pressure to put on. I don't even know, what is Isla, 6-7 years old? I think that those conversations are very premature here. And you do have, you've got the Isabella Robustos of the world.
You guys are talking like Robusto doesn't exist.
Yeah, I think. Well, and again, to be fair, to be clear, Deegan was tearing it up in the West Series as well. And look where she is now. It's not a guarantee by any means, but very promising, strong start to her ARCA career. I wouldn't say, we got to wait for Dale Jr.'s daughters to get in the car before we see that. I think there are certainly some strong candidates for female NASCAR superstar who are working their way up through the ranks right now. So let's not go there just yet here. And then I heard AM Racing is going to be just one of those teams part-time for Cup drivers. We'll see. I know Big Machine Racing was doing that when they initially benched Jade Buford. So not entirely unprecedented for a team like that to be going down that path. We have seen Logano and Barry now. It'll be interesting to see who's in that car through the rest of the year. I know that I think the entry lists are out. I didn't catch who was in the 15 this weekend, but we'll see. Going to be an interesting conversation the rest of the year for sure. All right, Jackson, thank you so much for joining us tonight. No shortage of things to talk about over in the open wheel world. Before we let you go, though, I know you said you really only caught the Cup race this weekend, but do you have one shining moment to share from us from what you saw in the world of motorsports this past weekend here?
Got to give it to one man by the name of Salvador Diablo Jr. You guys might know him as a former NASCAR Mexico Series champion. First full-time series in INDY NXT with Andretti. Has not done great on the road courses. Best finish of 5th in the second race at Laguna, but now finally gets to kind of show that oval experience in INDY NXT and gets his first podium this season. Has had a fairly quiet 2024 campaign so far. So really, really cool to see him kind of come up front.
Yeah. Well, again, as Brandon mentioned as well, Jamie Chadwick, strong run for her again in 7th place, started even higher than that. So Looks like she's picking up the ovals as well. I don't know that she's going to win a race here to close the year on the ovals just yet, but certainly running much better than she was last year. So that's good to see.
Yeah, anything could happen. And also got to give a shout out to Christian Brooks, who hopped in an Indy NXT for the first time at Laguna Seca and has been also consistently running up front. Again, not a huge jump there going from a USF 2000 car, but to be kind of up with the big kids and still be able to play, especially on an oval like this, I think is really, really cool. Just the ability to kind of pick up and be competitive.
All right, we'll leave it there. Before we let you go, Jackson, just took a look at the entry list. Josh Berry back in the 15 at Indianapolis this weekend. So sticking with him after Pocono. Hopefully he gets a better result than he had this past weekend here. Jackson, thanks again so much for taking time out of your schedule to make it work. And don't be a stranger. Hopefully we'll see you again soon.
100%. Thanks, boys.
See you, Jackson.
All right, Brandon, let's go ahead and move on here to the NASCAR Xfinity Series. And Cole Custer finally breaking through, getting not just his first win of the year, the first win for Ford. Brandon, are you surprised that it took them this long to get that win? We were talking at the start of the year how long it was taking them to win across all three series, but finally now in the middle of July, they get their win in Xfinity.
Yeah, it does surprise me that it did take him till the summer swing to finally pick up a win, but also just the scarceness of Ford as a manufacturer in the Xfinity Series kind of lowers your chances, I think, to get that win as quickly as the other teams. I mean, Chevy is the dominant one, and Toyota is certainly a close second, but Ford, they really are lacking in the Xfinity Series, and I wish that weren't the case. I wish we had more of a balance of power and keeping all the branches kind of equal. But yeah, if we kind of knew if anyone was going to do it, most likely it was going to be Cole Custer, and that's exactly who showed up today or on Saturday at Pocono.
Well, on that note, like we said, Cole Custer, one of the top talents, I think, in the Xfinity Series, and proved that with a championship last year. Has had the speed, hasn't been able to break through the victory lane, but he has had some strong results, top fives, top tens all across the board to start the year. Brandon, we know obviously Stewart-Haas Racing is closing at the end of the year, but the Haas name is not going to go away entirely. We're going to keep these two Xfinity cars under the Haas factory team banner, and then Gene Haas is also going to have one Cup Series charter. If Custer defends his championship, he would be the back-to-back Xfinity Series champion. Is there any way you can justify putting anybody in that Haas factory team Cup Series seat not named Cole Custer if he does defend this championship?
Man, if that weren't enough, you add that the Custer family is also, I believe, closely tied with Haas Automation.
Yes, absolutely.
That's correct. So, I mean, there's your two big pillars right there. If he can double down with this championship in 2024, absolutely put him in the Haas factory team in the Cup Series. I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what this might look like on the Cup side. Of course, for the Xfinity Series, most likely going to be able to keep their 00 and possibly the 98. I don't know what they're going to salvage exactly from Stewart-Haas Racing, what that plan looks like. It should be interesting nonetheless, and whether they change the way the numbers look. I'm always curious of those sorts of things. But for the Cup side, I wonder what number they're going to take, and I think a lot of people are also wondering if they can go back to their roots and finally get the 0 back into the Cup Series and pick up where Net Zero kind of left off. Of course, that was more of a commercial tie-in, but I wonder what can be done for that Haas factory team in the Cup Series. But absolutely, Cole Custer is the name I think of. Even if he doesn't win this championship, I think that's where he's headed in 2025.
Well, if it's Cole, I've got a feeling it would be the 00. Just because that's kind of been his number all throughout his career, working his way up through the ranks. But yeah, I mean, they could choose either variation of a 0, and it would be, fitting either way. It would certainly be a throwback to the original days of the original Haas CNC team and that Net Zero sponsorship. But yeah, I think I'm totally in agreement. I think Cole Custer absolutely should be the front runner for that seat. I feel bad for Ryan Preece. I know he would certainly have the modifieds to fall back on if all else fails, but I would hope there would be a solid Xfinity or truck program for him at the very least, because he is also a very talented racing driver, and it's unfortunate that he sounds like he's going to be the odd man out. With Chase Briscoe going to Gibbs and Noah Gregson, Chase Briscoe, or Noah Gregson and Josh Berry, also finding new homes for 2025 Front Row and Wood Brothers, respectively. Not sure what Ryan Priest's plans are going to be, but he certainly deserves to be behind the wheel of a race car somewhere. So hopefully he'll find something.
My mind is, this might be a little off, but my mind is thinking about Harrison Burton with Josh Berry going to the Wood Brothers.
Yeah.
And I can remember a time like right before COVID when Harrison Burton was the bee's knees. I mean, he was on fire, winning it. Yeah, winning at Auto Club. Yeah, even during COVID.
That 2020 season, I think, was spectacular.
Lit it up in the Xfinity Series.
Yeah, and again, I know kind of came back down to earth in 2021, but I think that that season certainly made a believer out of me that Harrison, is no slouch. He has talent behind the wheel of a race car as well. But again, I think I see both sides of the argument now that we're in year 3. At some point, you should have seen the results improve, and if anything, they've dipped a little bit for what's essentially the 4th Penske car. So I understand that that's not a great look, but I also think even though he had extensive Xfinity Series experience at that point, and this maybe is why Sam Mayer has been a little bit overlooked as well. I think teams are a little bit hesitant to throw a rookie or throw an early 20-something into a Cup Series car, knowing that the pressure is going to be on them to perform right away and knowing how difficult that really is. So again, I hope that Harrison doesn't get thrown out, left to dry entirely either. But again, if I had to make a prediction, probably you're looking at an Xfinity or Truck Series return for him for a couple of years to try to rack up some wins, maybe compete for a championship, and then a couple years down the line, maybe go back after a Cup Series seat. Who knows?
Yeah, it's kind of like the John Hunter Nemechek route. You went up to
Great
Cup,
example.
you come back down, earn your stripes, and then go back up. But I guess I'm playing some kind of silly season here because I see if Cole Custer does do what I think he's going to do and be the Haas factory guy in Cup, then that leaves the 00 open or whatever they want to make it in Xfinity, and that might be a spot for Harrison Burton if that is the case. We do know Harrison Burton is out, so he has to move somewhere or go away. I don't see him going away. Too young.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, speaking of going away, it looks like we might have a long-time perennial Xfinity Series independent doing just that. Take no pleasure in bringing it up, but it is news that continued to break today. I feel like it's at least worth mentioning. JD Motorsports reportedly filing for Chapter 11. A lot of people going unpaid. Some rumors in the garage area, including some drivers potentially. I don't want to speculate too much, but they are not on the entry list. They have sold the owner's points from the number 4 team over to the number 45 for Alpha Prime Racing, and Alpha Prime confirmed that themselves as well. And we're hearing the latest is that they're still hoping to put together a late entry for Indianapolis, but it sounds like a lot of pieces need to be put into the puzzle for that to happen first, and that involves a lot of people being paid who probably should have been paid a while ago. They're still waiting to be paid, and it's difficult to do that given the current financial state of that team. So, Brandon, I don't know if you have any thoughts on JD Motorsports. I know certainly in recent years you think of Ross Chastain dragging that car to top 10s, even a couple of top 5s on occasion, and certainly outperforming his equipment, becoming known for that, and that ultimately leading to the opportunities that he's gotten now in Cup. But this is a team that's been around for decades in this series. What are your thoughts on seeing them, unfortunately, in this state here?
Yeah, I always hate to see this for any team, no matter what level it is. But a lot of fond memories of JD Motorsports. If this truly is the end, they were the place where the Rhino, Ryan Vargas, really got a lot of his career starts for Xfinity. Of course, just absolutely spectacular at the social game on X is Ryan Vargas. I think a lot of that guy. Also, Garrett Smithley done a lot for his career. And I think one of their greatest achievements, maybe, and I've seen this floating around X as well, is the deal they had with the Flex Seal family of products.
Yes.
I mean, you talk about getting a brand together and getting a brand activated at a racetrack, getting Phil Swift, I mean, to be a part of your race team. That is, I mean, memes and all, that was a great activation for NASCAR, I believe. Flex Seal, Flex Blue, Flex tape. I mean, and having it where one event at Bristol, they really activated at Bristol from what I saw, and they had Flex Seal on all of their entries.
Yeah,
An
I think
iconic paint scheme, I think, for the Xfinity
yeah,
Series.
like one car had Flex Seal, one was Flex Shot, Flex Glue, Flex Tape, like all the different brands or different products from the same brand, I should say. Perhaps a nightmare for the sponsors, but certainly cool to see small teams like that, doing brand activation with such iconic products. And you bring up Vargas as well. I mean, Vargas had TikTok on his car a few years ago. I mean, you want to talk about activating sponsorship from the social media side of things. I mean, that was a massive deal for him. And I still remember when he finished 8th in 2020 at that Texas race. Really strong result for the underdogs there. So, hate to see that team go. And again, it goes way back. I remember, 07, the first year I watched NASCAR, and the late Eric McClure bringing his hefty sponsorship to that team with that number 0 car.
Yes. Yeah.
So there's all sorts of drivers, all sorts of memories that you can point out from JD Motorsports' time here. We'll see if this is the end. Certainly doesn't sound good, unfortunately, but hopefully everything over there can get resolved and they can kind of reset. But it's unfortunate anytime you see a team have to close their doors, but especially one of the smaller independents in the Xfinity Series. It's unfortunate to see. So we'll keep our eye on this story if anything further develops. If they do get a last-minute 11th resolution to their issues and are able to put a car on track this weekend, but sad news to say the least coming out of Xfinity.
Yeah, for sure.
We move on now to the Craftsman Truck Series race at Pocono, and stop me if you've heard this before. Corey Heim took the win once again.
Heard it before.
And
I'll let you finish.
Yes, not too surprising here. Christian Eckes up there in third. Those two have been in the top 3 each for the last 3 race weekends. Corey Heim would be able to say that going even further back if he hadn't gotten disqualified a few races ago from a second place finish. So, Brandon, I'll just ask the question here. I think it's fairly obvious. There might only be one name that comes to mind, but is there anybody out there that's going to be able to stop Corey Heim from just running away, at least to a championship 4 where we know anything can happen? But in a normal series, he would be running away with his championship, I suppose. Or is it just Christian Eckes and him versus the world right now?
I think it's Christian Eckes that's the one that can stop him, but even that is kind of a very close battle anyway. Corey Heim and Christian Eckes are the class of the field right now. You get the 5 wins for Heim so far this year, and then the 3 for Christian Eckes. I just wonder. I think I asked in the chat. I wonder if Christian Eckes can catch up to Corey Heim and tie him up before it's Heim time again somewhere else. I mean, there's not many races on the Truck Series calendar. As we know, it's pretty short, and the playoffs basically start tomorrow with some big sputters in between events. So, I mean, there's still time, but I wonder if Christian Eckes can catch up to Corey Heim, who's definitely going places after this season.
Yeah, well, Heim or Eckes rather has to win the next 2 races because Richmond is the cutoff before the playoffs begin. So he's at 3 wins. Heim is at 5. Heim has won every other race since Kansas, and the races he hasn't won, he's been in the mix, winning Kansas 28th at Darlington, but he led the most laps, won both the stages, won North Wilkesboro second, and led the most laps at Charlotte before he got disqualified. So again, that's the only reason he's behind Eckes in points right now. If he hadn't been disqualified there, kept his points from that night, he would certainly be ahead of where Eckes is right now. And then winning Gateway, 3rd at Nashville, a race Eckes won, and 1st at Pocono. So any other year, you look at Eckes' results, and again, aside from a 32nd place run at Atlanta for Eckes, he's been in the top 10 every race this year. Any other year, I think he would be running away with the points lead in the championship, but he's got Corey Heim standing in his way here, who has had a couple of bad results in terms of points, but certainly not in terms of how he's been running on track, that are weighing him down a little bit. But of course, everything is going to get reset when we get to the postseason here. And in terms of playoff points, it's certainly Heim leading that battle right now. And again, like I mentioned, you take a look at the championship race at Phoenix last year that Heim was involved in. It certainly is not a guarantee that he's going to be lifting a championship trophy at the end of the year. But when you look at how he's running right now, and you look past Christian Eckes, I think it has to be those two versus the field at this point. They're certainly on a completely different level right now.
What we mean to say is Ben Rhodes is your Craftsman Truck Series champion this year.
Wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. Would not surprise me in the slightest here at all with how this season has gone, or how the last couple of seasons have gone. Actually, certainly how last year's finale went. But looking at Rhodes here, only 2 top 5s, 9th in the point standings. So he's got some work to do if he wants to be in contention later this year. But again, wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if he sneaks in there at the very end of the year, turns it up late in the year, and gets him in Championship 4, and then all hell breaks loose again. Who knows what's going to happen?
Hey, D's get degrees, and then you get to Phoenix and you go win. That's Ben Rose's strategy here.
You don't even have to win. His teammate did it in 2019 without winning.
There you go.
You don't even have to win. All right. Well, on a more serious note, of course, I think NASCAR fans really getting tired of the weather, getting tired of these constant delays here. But I want to applaud NASCAR. They got the race in. Sounded like we might see a rain-shortened event here at Pocono this weekend. Summertime storms popping up to the surprise of nobody. But despite looking like we had a window, then having to bring the cars back down or trucks back down pit road, they ended up getting the race finished. And then the sun was shining as rain was falling as Heim was doing his winner's interview. But Brandon, do you appreciate the efforts that NASCAR put in, the lengths that they went to ultimately succeed in getting this race finished despite the weather conditions?
Yeah, I do, and I'm glad that they waited out, even if it is just 7 or 6 laps to go at Pocono, because they understand more than the fan does sometimes more than the fan does, that the fan's going to complain, oh, it's just 6 laps to go, just call it. But this could impact someone's championship just based on how they finish here with these 6 laps to go. And we know how Truck Series restarts are. I mean, your race could be won or lost by how we get back to green flag racing and get to the checkered. And so whenever this was happening, I was thinking I was going to be able to watch all of it on Fox, because I was at camera for baseball when this was going on, and ended up having to listen to it on MRN while the game is going on, and hearing the updates about the rain delay. So that's how I experienced that on Friday night. And I think the MRN crew were saying pretty much the same sentiments there of applauding NASCAR for trying and waiting it out, and then being rewarded for waiting and actually being able to get it into the scheduled time, and didn't even have to go to the 8:20. I think it was 8:20 p.m. or 9:20 p.m. Eastern, something like that, where there was a cutoff for that because there's no lights at Pocono, but they were able to get it in, and I am glad for the persistence for sure.
Yeah, it was 8:20 this weekend because they were on the East Coast. It was 9:20 when they were at Chicago. Yeah. But again, that's another positive, I think. Kudos to Fox, actually. I know earth-shattering praising a Fox Truck Series broadcast here, but they were very transparent with how they handled the time race, putting the clock up in the top left corner of the screen on the broadcast, right underneath how many laps we had to go. I am a little frustrated that they took it away and never brought it back. I do understand the idea that once we got the trucks rolling again, we knew that they were going to be able to get 6 laps done within the hour time limit or whatever it was we had left. But then we had the sprinkles come back up again. They had to come back down pit road and continue to wait out a little bit. Again, I'll say the same thing I said about NBC. I don't know why it's so difficult to just have that clock there underneath the lap ticker the entire time, but at least it was underneath the lap counter and not in the bottom right, taking up even more space like NBC had it. So I can praise Fox as well. I can give praise to NBC. I'll criticize Fox. I'll criticize NBC. It just depends on, what I think they deserve. And I try to treat both networks equally. That's what I do around here.
Yeah, with NBC, the time being on the bottom right is kind of like what we talked about earlier with the Nashville Super Speedway being at the end of the INDY NXT calendar and clogging up the end of the season with ovals. They didn't intend for it to be that way, but in the case of this emergency, they're doing the best they can with what they have left. And so, building a graphics package like that, they don't have that ready. That was unprecedented, really, for Chicago. They just here's what we got. What do we have? We have a timer anywhere? All right, throw that on there, and that's what you got.
But the thing about NBC was the bottom right is where they show their small screen. I forget. Do they show the replay on the big screen in the top left or top middle left, and they stay live on the right, or is it forget which one it is. I feel like Fox it's the reverse of that. But
yeah,
anyway, they're going to a replay.
Right.
They got the picture-in-picture, and the clock was taking up the entire screen here, so they had to hastily remove the clock and then put the clock back. But
see, that's the beauty of first time.
Yeah,
we didn't build
live
this for this
television.
purpose
Yeah.
kind of television. Yeah.
And look, I'm not sitting up here on my high horse. I know it takes a lot of people to put these broadcasts together. But again, if we're going to continue to do this, and we're going to continue to have these,
yeah, I'm sure they built it by now.
Yeah, time limits at tracks where we don't have lights. I'd like to see a permanent place for the clock that we can adjust if necessary. But again, we'll cross that bridge when we get here. Maybe we'll get there later this year. Maybe we'll get there this weekend. Who knows? Indianapolis doesn't have lights. Obviously, the 500 was weather impacted. Who knows what's going to happen the rest of the year? But again, I applaud NASCAR here. I know I've been kind of critical of them and how they've handled these situations. I think they came under a lot of fire after the Coke 600, but they tried their damnedest to get the race in and finish what really wasn't that many laps, which really didn't impact the results that much because Corey Heim still ran away with it regardless, and they got it in. And I think as race fans, we can't ask for much more than that. We all get frustrated by the weather, certainly the last couple of years, the last couple of summers, but NASCAR waited out, they got it in, and we can applaud them for that for sure. All right. We have a comment in chat here. John Bender says add lights to Indy. I think you're saying no?
No. Sorry. Not yet. We will let the later generations handle that.
I think I can picture like an Indy car under the lights at IMS. I think would be a really cool spectacle. But you got to remember, the track is 2.5 miles. I don't know if you would light up the infield road course as well. What that would look like, I'd imagine that would be pretty difficult. But yeah, I mean, it's very easy to say, oh, they should do this, but it would certainly be quite a massive undertaking to try to get a project like that off the ground.
Someone who's into aesthetics, it would change the whole vibe of IMS. It would forever be changed.
That too.
It would not look the same.
Yeah. Although, to be fair, I'm sure there were some people in the 90s saying that about Charlotte and Daytona, and they eventually went down that path as well. So
that's right.
Who knows? Let's see. Also, John says, bring the Cup guys to IRP, then they have lights there. I wouldn't mind seeing the Cup cars at IRP. I prefer that over the Indy road course, but I'd want to see the Xfinity cars there. That to me would be perfect. You know, trucks and Xfinity at IRP, same weekend as the Cup race on Sunday. I think if NASCAR is going to be at the Brickyard, Cup cars on the oval, that's the only way it should be done.
Yeah, and I think Ben, we're going to be talking about this next Monday, where we go, man, the Xfinity Series, we're having the same problem we had the last time we were here with Xfinity cars on the IMS oval. I hope that's not the case. I hope things maybe are a little bit different. It was a little bit different of a Xfinity Series package then in 2019. But yeah, maybe things are different.
I'm just looking forward to seeing the next gen on the oval. I think that's
me too.
Very exciting. So hopefully that puts on a good show. I know that the Gen 6 bar was not super high towards the end of that race's run, but we'll see. I'm cautiously optimistic for this weekend. One more comment from John here, and then we'll get into our one shining moments. Trucks need more races in 22. I don't entirely disagree with that, but I think the 25 that they were at for several years should probably be the max for that series. But again, we talked on this show before, how the season is staggered to the point where we're talking about the playoff cutoff line being 2 races away in the middle of July.
Might need that 25 to fill in the loops. Yeah,
I think, you could certainly add. I don't see the harm in getting back up to 25 and adding a couple races to the back half of the season for sure. Although it's better than it was. I remember days where we went to Daytona and then we had like 5 weeks off before Martinsville was race 2. I think, certainly, I think we probably have the opposite problem now, but it's better than kicking off the season at Daytona, everybody getting so amped up for that, and then it's a complete buzzkill where you forget about the series for 5 weeks, and then it's like, oh, it's back. So I think that's, they fixed that problem, but now maybe they have the opposite problem on the back end. All right. Well, Brandon, if you don't have any more thoughts on the Truck Series, I'll let you take the way here. What is your one shining moment from this weekend in the world of racing?
Yes, one shiny moments. I have to give it to the decision this year on the calendar to go one date for Pocono Raceway. Matthew Owens and I talked about that on the broadcast with USRN, which also simulcasted on JV Motorsports. That was a lot of fun, and a lot of you followed along on that. So we thank you very much for that. And also, when you're on there, you get to promote Grid Network because Matthew is a big supporter of us as well. So it's a great synergy going on there. But yeah, the one date for Pocono, I think, was a big win. The sellout crowd there at Pocono Raceway, and basically nothing left there in the infield as far as camping. I think that's the proper move because the two Pocono dates were so close together on the season on the schedule. It just makes sense to have it where you have the one date, and Pocono is that certain kind of spice, the tricky triangle, the three different Frankenstein corners, where it's best to have it once a year, and if you have it twice a year, you're going to get a little what's the word? You're going to get a little burned out on it, I guess. And then also, good job for Ford in the Xfinity Series, getting the monkey off the shoulder, and can go forward saying that they are not still winless in the Xfinity Series for the rest of the year.
Well, the second part of that is what I'm going to go with as well. Well done to Cole Custer. Well done job to Ford and Stuart Haas. And especially given the news of the last month and a half or so, I think it would have been very easy for everybody of that team just roll over and consider this a lame duck year and go out with a whimper. But they are motivated to go out with a bang. And, I think that their Xfinity program, for all the grief that their Cup Series program has been given about not running well, again, it wasn't for lack of trying or lack of performance that Cole Custer couldn't visit victory lane, because he has been knocking on the door for a long time. He's the defending champion. He could defend his championship later this year at Phoenix. I'll give him my one shining moment. And again, like we talked about earlier in the show, certainly think he is the lead candidate for that Haas factory seat in the Cup Series next year. So we'll keep our eye on that as well. And let's see. John, a couple more comments to go through. Bring Eldora back. Certainly don't disagree there. I think we're going to be on dirt. That is the place to be. And Willpower winning gets my one shining moment. Dang it, man. We should have brought that up when Jackson was here, because Jackson, of course, predicted that
Penske Perfect at Iowa
getting out there out of his prime. And Penske Perfect weekend, winning both IndyCar races and the Cup Series race as well with Ryan Blaney. So well done to them. Well done to Willpower. He could win a championship again this year. And Jackson's going to have to continue to eat crow on that, I'm afraid. But great job for Willpower as well. Certainly worthy of one shining moment. And that's going to do it for us here tonight on Grid Encore. So as I go solo here, there we go. Thank you all so much for watching, as always. And be sure to subscribe to the Grid Network here on YouTube. Visit us on all our social media platforms, X/Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, LinkedIn, Threads, and most importantly, right here on YouTube. If you really liked what you saw tonight, you can take a few minutes after the show to consider joining our Patreon. Join Colin Deschelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew in investing in the Grid Network to help keep us on the air throughout 2024 and beyond. And as you can see, our goal of long-term goal of $500 per month will allow us to begin attending races on site on a more regular basis, expanding our coverage for you, the viewers. You can also now become a member of the Grid Network YouTube channel, or if you'd rather make a one-time donation instead, you can donate through YouTube via the Super Chat option, or you can visit the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description box below as well. You can buy a cup of coffee specifically for your favorite on-air talent. Any amount will help us continue to grow this project here at Grid Network. Now, I will be back on Grid tonight this week with Kobe Lambeth. Certainly no shortage of things to talk about there, so make sure you stay tuned for that. Women in Motorsports hopefully going to be back sometime this week as well, so stay tuned for that on the YouTube channel. And then more Grid Live coverage this upcoming weekend, as always, pre-race, wrap-up, and then we'll do it all over again next Monday night here on Encore. Brandon, any final thoughts before we sign off for this evening?
It doesn't matter how many people are not in the stands this coming weekend. The NASCAR Cup Series needs this race. The Brickyard is back. Someone is going to kiss the bricks, and I'm very excited whatever happens.
Welcome back, Brickyard 400. Never should have left in hindsight. And I'm with you, Brandon. I hope that people come. I hope that people show up and come out to the racetrack, come out to IMS. But even if they
remember, if a lot of people are there, Matthew said this, even if there are a lot of people there, it may not even look like there's a lot of people there because the place is massive.
That is true too. You could have 100,000 people in the stands, and you're still going to have those sections that are roped off that they're not filling up just because you can put 300,000 people in the stands in the month of May. So, but again, I would hope that you could do better than the 40, 50,000 that we were getting before, we took the race off the schedule. So again, I'm hoping for the best. I hope a lot of people come out, but even if they don't, I think this is a race that deserves to be on the calendar. Whether or not it's the fourth crown jewel, I think it's still up for debate with the Bristol night race. But I digress there. It's a conversation for another day, maybe an open segment on next week's show. If you're still watching, maybe comment down in the chat room, or in the comment section rather, because I'm sure you'll see this after the fact. But maybe that's a conversation we can have next week as well.
I told behind the mic it's in the process of healing, and if the product improves, it could once again return to its rightful spot as a fourth crown jewel.
All right, we'll leave it there. For Brandon Crossland, for Jackson Lambros, I'm Ben Schneider. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again next week. Have a good one, everybody.